Hey everyone, welcome to the show. We are here with Ashley Stewart, professional organizer with Rethink Clutter. Welcome to the
Hmm.
show.
Thank you.
I kind of put the feelers out and I had a few questions come back.
Awesome.
So let's just start with answering some questions that have been burning on people's minds about all things organization. So the first question that we have is from Randy. How do I decide to keep, sell, or toss what may be considered a family heirloom?
When it comes to family heirlooms, you're looking at a combination. So there are reasons why we get stuck in our stuff, right? And that whole adage of clutter is just delayed decisions. That's great, but what decisions are we making? Um, it leads us to finding a way out. So if we're looking at a family heirloom, first of all, we have probably some sentimental attachment to it, some kind of nostalgia. Um, and when we're dealing with nostalgia, we have to understand if it's true nostalgia, first of all, it's going to attach us to something greater than ourselves. No matter what other complex emotion we're feeling at the time, it has to bring us happiness and it has to be relevant to us now. It has to be important to us now. It can't be one of those past things. Clear back in high school. No, it has to be important now. If it's not that, if it doesn't do those three things, it's not true nostalgia. And so, if it is true nostalgia, if it does those three things, then what we need to do is decide, is this the most important thing that I can keep that reminds me of the thing that it's connecting me to? So if it's connecting me to another person, is there something more important that can connect me to that person than this particular item? If the answer is yes, then don't feel bad to get rid of it because there's another item connecting you to that person, place, thing, that event, whatever that was. And so we can say, I've got this taken care of. I can go ahead and get rid of this and move on.
When a parent dies
Mhm.
and that child feels like they need to bring every single thing that that parent owned into their own home, it kind of reminds me of that. Like,
Yes.
oh, my parents passed away and now every single thing they owned is now something that I own. How do you overcome that guilt, maybe, of
Mhm.
like it's okay to say goodbye to the things that used to belong to your parents, and it's
Yes.
okay that just because it was important to them, it doesn't need to necessarily be important to you.
No, exactly. So if it is true nostalgia and it's truly something for you that is for you, it connects you to something greater than yourself, it brings you happiness, and it's relevant to you now, then that's something that we say, okay, then quantity, how much, where am I going to put it? Can I use it as a conversation starter so that this is something that, I can go down memory lane more than once every time I move in 40 years and clean out my attic and find this accidental box. And it's like, oh, yay, that's not true nostalgia. You're hiding that.
Mhm.
That's sad. You want to keep those nostalgic items front and center. So if it's not true nostalgia, then what do we do? And you touched on that. You said it out loud. You said guilt. The other half of guilt is projected value. And one that accompanies that quite frequently is fear. And
Mhm.
so guilt is usually an I statement. And guilt comes from when we're doing something that goes against our beliefs and values. So it has to come from me. I would feel bad if I got rid of that because it's something that I am doing contrary to my values and beliefs. I don't throw my family away. Okay, well, can you separate your family from the item? You're not throwing your family away. You're not throwing your memories away. You're throwing an object away. So we need to get away from this personification of, there's a better term for it, but the personification of a thing. Things do not hold the person. They don't hold the value of the memory, right? And
Mhm.
so it's one of those where if it's guilt, it's because we're doing something that goes contrary to our values and beliefs. So if you can say I value my family, why would I get rid of this? Well, you can value your family in other ways than holding on to things. And so then it's weeding through things. But if it comes in the form of they just died, they just passed on, we're adding the concept of time to that. And we just hit the We just talked about in one question, we talked about all 5 reasons why we get stuck on our
We're
stuff.
overachievers over
Right?
here.
You just jumped right in. You thought that was a really simple question, and it's a more profound answer, and that's why we get stuck is because nobody teaches us this.
Yeah.
And so, I can expound on all of these answers, and the point is it has become a mental emotional game for you. It's much more than just quick, make a decision so that you know whether to throw it away or put it away.
Hmm.
So, when it comes to family heirloom, is it nostalgic? Then we say, okay, if it's true nostalgia, how am I going to keep it? Like, how many of these items am I going to keep and where am I going to keep it? If it comes to someone who is just passed on, we have that time element of, I am currently grieving right now, this very second, and everything is equally as important. And I would feel really overwhelmed to sit down and try to decide right now what I'm going to keep and what I'm not. And so then when it comes to time, then we have to implement those deadlines. And sometimes, especially when it comes to someone passing on, when we say, I can't take the time right now, my deadline is not, it's not, when am I going to have gone through this? The
Hmm.
deadline is, I am going to sit in this grief. I am going to sit, and then I'm going to check back in with myself in 3 months, 6 months, a year,
Hmm.
however long you need to process all of this emotion, as the relationship has just changed before we jump into the relationship with stuff. So the time limit, the deadline can be, I'm going to sit in this for 6 months. And then once I hit that deadline, then I can see, okay, can I now process and identify the stuff that's just like, let's go through the junk mail. Let's get rid of the stuff that, you had old bottles of lotion from that you bought 50 years ago that are now old and they don't smell very good. And so it's like, then can you get rid of what's obviously garbage? And we move from there. So when it comes to the timeline, it's can I set myself deadlines? And if I'm still really overwhelmed, can I involve someone else in the process who's going to be objective instead of emotional?
Hmm.
So if I need to go down nostalgia, if I need to go down memory lane to see if this is still relevant to me, then I can call someone with the same nostalgic feelings and go, okay, that really wasn't quite how I remembered it. Maybe this isn't the thing that I need to keep. Or I get, oh my gosh, I loved that story so much. Every time I pick this up, I think of that story. And so I'm going to hang on to it. So it's one of those things where you balance out the objectivity of it versus the emotion of it. When we get to guilt, let's go back to guilt, right? So the guilt comes from doing something that's contrary to your values and beliefs. If you are doing something that is aligned with your values and beliefs and decluttering and living a minimalistic or a simplified lifestyle can still be part of your values and beliefs, right? So I'm taking care of my family. I'm not allowing them to live in, a heaped up house. I am wanting to honor and respect the memory of this other person without it becoming a shrine or worship or whatever that is, then we can say, okay, I'm not acting contrary to my values and beliefs. I am honoring this person. I'm remembering this person because I have these other things that hold greater amounts of nostalgia than this over here. So I'm going to move on. And so just being very, very clear with your values and beliefs can help you dictate whether or not this is actually guilt. If it is guilt, how do we replace guilt? We replace guilt with gratitude. Gratitude is one of the emotions that we can actually see on a brain scan. That if we're living in a state of gratitude, it perks up our brain and it lights up our brain in different ways. So then we're going to live in the state of gratitude in past, present, and future. We're going to be grateful for what we had when we had it. And that could include the stuff or the relationship. We're going to be grateful for what we have now, that we aren't left wanting, that we have everything that we need currently. And we're going to be grateful for living in the future, for what we can receive in the future. So if you can see me, I'm going to open up my fists and let go And because my hands are now open, I can receive what's going to come in the future. And the side effect of that is that somebody else then can be grateful for what you got rid of that's still
Mhm.
good that they can use, right?
Yeah.
So we replace guilt with gratitude. Now, if it's not guilt, if it doesn't come from us, from crossing our own boundaries, it's going to come from a projected value from somebody else. This is somebody else's idea of the best and the brightest. And this is what they think you should keep. And
Mm.
it's really funny. Have you ever taken something, you've received something from a parent or a friend, or you've even tried to do it to somebody else and say, well, it's not that important to me, but I don't really want to get rid of it yet. So here, you have it.
Yep.
And it's important for you now because I say so.
And this
And
was
we have to,
important to me. You can't get rid of
yeah,
it. You
yeah.
can't. No, I loved this so
I
much.
loved it. Well, then why are you getting rid of it? And it's because they are stuck too in not understanding what their relationship with this item is and what their emotional attachment is. And so it's like, well, I don't want it, but it was important to me, and so therefore it must be important to you. Here you go. It
Yep.
is now yours. So when it comes to a projected value, you really have to watch out. And projected value can be either the emotional input from other people, or it can be money.
Mm.
That Black Friday or the sales marketing, that is down to a science, and they really get us, and they're trying to sell an experience or an emotion. And if that, it turns into money or the projected value of somebody else. And so you have to stand back and say, okay, what's the true value to me right now?
Hmm.
The true value doesn't have to be money. It can be time. It can be experience. It can be clear space, clear mind. It can be a lot of other things besides money.
Hmm.
And so,
Like that
what's
was
the
really
true
expensive.
value?
Don't throw it away.
Exactly. Yeah. Get rid of it. It's like, okay, well, let's have a conversation about what the true value of this is right now, because value and worth are two different things, right? And sometimes we project more value onto something than it's worth. And so we can't sell emotion, we can't sell nostalgia, we can't sell value, we can only sell worth. And so
Mhm.
something is only as you can only sell something for as much money as what somebody else is willing to pay for it.
Yep.
And that's their value of the item that you have. So it's one of those where you have to balance out when you understand that someone is trying to project onto you, and it's not guilt, then you have to say, okay, for me, what is the true value of this to me, not to Black
Hmm.
Friday, not to Aunt Joe, not to, the kids that they're going to want this someday, what to me
Hmm.
right now,
Yep.
not
I
what it
love that.
was, not what it could be. And one of the things that pairs up with that really well is this concept of fear, which is our last way that we get stuck in our stuff. And that is just a fear of, what if I am left wanting? What if in this future of all futures, this unlimited future in front of me, what if it turns out that I really needed this item in the future and I got rid of it, and
Hmm.
therefore I am going to be left wanting? And our brain interprets that as, you have a saber-toothed tiger chasing you. Like, fear is fear. Your brain doesn't differentiate what kind of fear is going on in your brain. It just recognizes fear. And so your brain tries to keep you safe by saying, well, if you can imagine a scenario in the future in which you could possibly, maybe, might someday, just in case, use this, you might need to hang on to it. And we get ourselves stuck and all wrapped up. And then we tuck things in little nooks and crannies in the house, and we save too many and too much of the wrong things for these
Hmm.
imaginative scenarios in the future that might not necessarily be how things are going to move forward. So then, and this is the most psychologically based way of getting out. We have to say, what's the possibility of needing this item versus the probability of needing this item? One of my sons was up late at night, absolutely terrified, could not sleep because he was afraid that Mount St. Helens was going to erupt
Oh
and kill
no.
us all in our sleep. We don't live next to Mount St. Helens. We're not even close. We're not, he just had seen something. And so he thought that Mount St. Helens was going to erupt and was going to kill us all in our sleep. And so I said, okay, well, what's the possibility of Mount St. Helens erupting? It's dormant, but it's not extinct. So is there a possibility? Yes, because that's what volcanoes do. They erupt. Is it probable that Mount St. Helens is going to erupt? No, it's not. Based on all the science and all the readings and all the records, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not probable. So we're going to be brave and go to sleep anyway. And in the morning, when we wake up and haven't been smothered by Mount St. Helens, we're going to celebrate that we
Mhm.
did something really scary. We did it anyway, and it worked. It worked. So it's the same concept when it comes to getting rid of things that we're scared about getting rid of, that we're afraid. This is a very irrational, illogical frame of mind because we're coming from the amygdala, because we're coming from the deepest part of our brain that is just trying to keep us safe. So we have to say, okay, logically, is it possible? If it's not possible, that's the end of the conversation. We get rid of it. Is it probable? If it's not probable, then that's the end of the conversation. If it is probable, if it is possible and probable, then we can say, okay, quantity wise, how many and how much. Now, that's the logical side of fear. That's trying to get us out of the amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex of making logical, rational decisions. But you still catch yourself saying, okay, that's great. But what if?
Mhm.
Just in case. Then we have to conquer the emotional side of it with a new emotion. So we're
Yeah.
trying to get out of fear. We're going to go flip into courage and say, logically, I've processed through this. And now I'm going to be courageous and get rid of the thing anyway. And, and. This is the key to overcoming fear. You have to celebrate. When you do something hard and you don't die, you have to celebrate
Yeah.
because you just created a new neural pathway to be able
Mm.
to say, if I got rid of something that I was scared of getting rid of, my brain needs to interpret this action as safe
Mhm.
instead of scary, instead of threatening. So now I need to celebrate because that hit of dopamine, I just did something I thought was scary. And instead of death, I got dopamine. That's fantastic. And so you just created a new neural pathway to be able to say, I could do that again. Let me see if I do that again and I can get myself another hit of dopamine. And so you do something scary again and you celebrate. You give yourself something to celebrate about. And then that next hit of dopamine solidifies that new neural pathway. And so all of a sudden it becomes not so scary getting rid of those things anymore. So, in that one little question, we touched all 5 reasons why we get stuck in our stuff.
Yeah.
We have time and overwhelm. We have nostalgia, guilt, projected or perceived value, and then fear. And if we understand those and we understand what's going on in our brain, because those are all emotional responses, right? So if we understand that that's what's going on in our brain, then we can say, okay, that's what's stopping me, which means I need to take this way out. So
And you
there
don't have
is
to do
no,
all the things every
no,
time.
mm-mm.
Like choose one because if you're overwhelmed and then you hear, now I have to do all five of those things and
Oh
I'm
man.
already
It's like,
overwhelmed.
wait a
It's like,
minute.
no, find one
No.
that fits.
Yeah.
Find an angle that works best or
And if you process through that angle and it's still not right, then ask yourself, okay, I thought this was nostalgia. Is it really projected value?
Mhm.
Okay, that makes more sense. So if it's really projected value, then I'm going to say, what's the true value of this to me right now? And then we're going to work through it that way instead of working
Mhm.
through it from the nostalgia point of view, which isn't going to help you because that wasn't the true underlying value. So yeah, but understanding all 5 reasons is going to give us the arsenal to be able to say, I got this. I got this. And sometimes, I say that decluttering is like peeling an onion. You have to go one layer at a time, and sometimes you cry, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
all part of the processing, and that's what helps us. So, for Randy, who says, how do I know when to do all of that for sentimental items?
Yeah.
It's, are you emotionally attached to that item, and that's why you're stuck? Okay, well then get out of the emotional side of things, and then it just becomes a matter of, if you're talking about selling, donating, or getting rid of it, that says dollar signs, and that is a projected value. That's
Mhm.
money, right? So, what's the true value of that thing to you right now? Does it still hold value? Then donate it and move on because somebody else is going to find it and see value in it and use it while it's still good. If you're in the capable realm to be able to say, I have the time and the capability of finding the best home for this to go to, then find the best home for it to go to. If it's not that big of a deal, or you don't have the time and the bandwidth to go find the perfect home, just take it to a good place, a good home, a good donation center. Take it to somewhere local where they could possibly need it and use it and understand, and find that value in it. That's not necessarily the best place, but it's still a good place. It's
Yeah.
better than the landfill and it's better than junking up your house with things that you don't value. Just take it to a good place to donate it to and move on.
You brought up relationships as well, and I couldn't help but think of that just over and over and over in my mind. Relationships are so important and your relationship with stuff. And I was just telling someone this literally last week as I was trying to help them clean out their room before they moved. And everything was important and everything was special and everything had a memory. And I had to say, if everything has a memory, then you're looking to your stuff to have a
Yep.
relationship with your stuff
Yep.
more so than the people around you. So if you're looking to your stuff to make you happy or your stuff brings you comfort and yet you're having a hard time with relationships in your life, then you kind of need to check in on how you're doing with the relationships in your life and why is it that the stuff holds so much weight in your heart. The people need to hold more weight in your heart than the stuff, like what you mentioned before. That memory should be enough to bring us joy without having to always have every little knickknack that reminds us of that. And everything can't have a special piece of our heart. If it does, then you need to kind of check in with that and say, okay, why is it that I'm making everything so special? Why am I holding on to this item so closely? How am I doing in my relationships with people? How am I doing in my relationship with myself, my own confidence, in my own ability to create happiness organically without having that item bring me the happiness?
Yes, absolutely. You put that so well. The name of my business is Rethink Clutter for a very specific reason,
Mhm.
right? Those re's are very important. There are 5 re's that can be toxic when it comes to our stuff, and that relationship is one of those 5. That's if you value stuff over human relationships, and that human relationship can be with yourself, right? It
Yep.
doesn't have to be external relationships. It can be with yourself too. Um, if stuff comes before human interaction, you are going to experience imbalance in your life, and you're not going to see the fulfillment of true joy and happiness. You're not going to be able to create those new nostalgic meanings and memories. And so, yes, everybody processes differently and has different values, obviously, of what they find important and what they want to hold on to. But there's a difference between, it's kind of like the difference between hoarding and a collection.
Hmm.
There's a very big difference. And sometimes they touch each other, but there's a very big difference. But we have to see that balance between the value of stuff and the value of relationships. It is highly important to value those relationships with people or the relationships with things.
And even just that feeling in life of being stuck.
Mhm.
So many times I come across people like, help me get unstuck. And it's always like you and I have even worked together and I've helped you and
Yes.
you've helped me in business and we've worked alongside of each other for a long time. And I love you so much
I
for
love
it.
it.
So
I love you.
I've learned a lot from you. And one thing that was always so cool whenever I would go and help you declutter someone's room or house or space, you could physically feel the house breathe. It was like, and I can even feel it now because you
It
feel
gives
that
me
release. Like
goosebumps.
I have goosebumps too, just remembering it. And not only when you felt that house breathe, the client could breathe easy. And whatever it was, even if they didn't exactly pinpoint what was making them stuck, being able to go through that process of releasing that literally changes their whole lives and helps
Absolutely.
them grow and helps them progress in business, in their personal relationships, in their home, in their family, and their ability to take care of themselves, the ability to take care of their children. Like it literally compounds into so many different things. Just being able to get unstuck with whatever that certain place is.
Yeah. Well, and how many times have we heard, quite a few years ago, there was some admiral that gave a graduation speech, and he said, if you want to be successful in life, make your bed. Dr. Jordan Peterson says the same thing. The first step in conquering the world is making your bed. I mean, there's something about creating order in
Mm-hmm.
your life physically that has those mental impacts, and vice versa. If you organize your mind, you are going to reflect that in your outer world. And so that goes both ways, that correcting the outer impacts the inner, correcting the inner impacts the outer. And
Mm-hmm.
it is so fascinating to watch people all of a sudden become way more successful and their mind is organized. So many people say, "Oh, Ashley, if you could just organize my mind." I'm like, I can actually. If you let me organize your outer space, then all of a sudden there's so much less you have to worry about in your inner space and in your inner
Mm-hmm.
thoughts. And yes, your house is breathing again. And yes, your mind is breathing again. And isn't it interesting how everything that we own connects us to a potential future, right? We talked
Yep.
about this, that's what the fear is that's holding us back, is there are so many potential futures that we can move into, and everything that we have connects us to a particular potential future. If we decide that there are certain futures for ourselves that we don't want, then we can let go of the things that are tying us to that future. I want to work in a corporate office and have the most glamorous wardrobe, the very sophisticated wardrobe, and I want long hair and I want to do, basic makeup every day and I want to wear these types of shoes. Then all of a sudden, if we want Gucci shoes, we're going to get rid of our New Balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going, the things that we own, the things that we surround ourselves with is going to move us into the future self that we want, that we choose. And our mind and our thoughts lead us there, and our mind and our thoughts follow us there as well. And so it's that balance of, I want this, and therefore my stuff is going to follow, which means my attitude is going to change and new thoughts come in and brings in and takes out new stuff, and my attitude and it's phenomenal. So if you need a brain reset, have a physical reset
Yep.
and see what happens to your mind. See what happens to your productivity. See what happens to the rest of your family and your relationships. And it's just phenomenal to see that happen simply because we got your physical space in check. It both narrowed your future so that that future could become huge for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
And do you
it's phenomenal to
recommend
see that.
starting with something small or huge? You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
sometimes people
Yes, I
try to go
totally do.
like way over and like organize the whole entire garage and then they get so overwhelmed that they leave
Uh-huh.
it in a space that was worse than before.
Right. So I have another organizer friend, Denise Nunes. She's wonderful. And her rule of thumb is, if it takes more than 15 minutes to tidy up, then it's time for a bigger project. And another organizer friend, Melissa, she coins the term, there's a difference between a practice and a project.
Mm.
So practice is maintenance. And that's that, what Denise said was that 15 minutes. And that's every time you hear uh, people talk about New Year's resolutions. It's like, oh, it's so easy. You can get organized in 15 minutes a day. No, you can stay organized in 15 minutes a day. I will argue this till the cows come home. You cannot get organized in 15 minutes a day. You can stay organized in 15 minutes a day. So if you run a pretty tight ship already and you're just kind of feeling like things are not quite tidied up, getting organized in 15 minutes a day, you're not actually getting organized. You have a pretty good basis of organization already, and you're tidying up in 15 minutes a day. If you go into the garage and you know that it's going to take you all day and you're all gung ho about it, and then you get in and you get stuck and you get overwhelmed, overwhelm, trigger, that is a key word over to time. That is the emotional component to time that we already talked about is overwhelm. And overwhelm either means that you don't understand the concept of time, how much time it's going to take you to complete this project, or you don't know how to do it from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get stuck in the overwhelm, that tells me that you're stuck, right?
Yeah.
So, can you get organized in 15 minutes a day? No. Can you stay organized in 15 minutes a day? Yes. So that just moved us out of the the practice of organization into the project of organization. So when it comes to the project of organization, it's a big project, and you have to be able to limit the amount of emotion that you put into that project. If you go
Yeah.
into it making an emotional decision with every single thing that you pick up and process, that is so overwhelming and it will shut you down so fast. So you have to know when. I just taught you how those five reasons. I just taught you how to recognize them and to overcome them. So now you know how, but you have to know when to interject that emotion into the process of it all. And then you have to be able to understand the process of integrating decluttering. Clutter is emotional. Organization is logical and
Yeah.
practical. So to combine the two, you have to do it in the right way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you spin out of control. And you've seen the memes floating around the internet where it's like, hey, I thought I was going to clean out my closet today. And before you know it, you've got these funky glasses on from some party back in college, and you've got the hat on from some memory, and you've got your bathrobe on because you got cold and now you're so warm you can't move. And I mean, you see that all over the internet, and it's funny because we've all done it.
Yeah.
But that just shows that you didn't match up the logic and the emotion of it the right way.
Yeah.
And so there is a better way of getting organized than not. But can you do it in 15 minutes a day? Nope.
Yeah. I
You
know.
have
I
to do a
agree.
project. You
Yeah.
have to do a project.
It reminds me of one of the questions that someone wrote. Tammy, she said, my house is full and I know it. Where do I start? And if I do start, I get halfway through and I get distracted. How do you focus? Oh, so many questions.
That's okay because I've got a good answer for you. There are, again, going back to those two things, clutter is emotional, organization is logical. And so there are two places potentially that you can start in your house. And those are the catalysts. That just means that that's what's going to get the snowball rolling, is that catalyst space. So go around your house and identify what the emotional catalyst is and what the physical catalyst is. The emotional catalyst is usually going to be, I would rather lock this door and never open it again. I would rather light a match and watch my house burn down than tackling it. And you can say that about your entire house, but there's usually one place more than another where that's going to be more true than not.
Mhm.
So if you are prepared to emotionally tackle that space, you've got your body double, somebody working with you. You've got your ability to try to minimize as much emotion as possible until it's time for you to bring in that emotion. Most of the time, what I do as the outside person are those emotional catalysts
Mhm.
because it's just too hard for someone to tackle on their own. So look for that emotional catalyst because that can, like you said, the house breathes.
Mhm.
You breathe, and all of a sudden, the rest of everything, if your emotional catalyst comes first, then all of a sudden, the rest of everything just goes, oh, well, the rest of the house isn't as big a deal as what I thought it was. It was just that emotional catalyst that was blocking you every single time you walked into the house. The other option is your physical catalyst. Where's the one space in the house that if I touch and tackle this space, it's going to bleed into so many other places in the house? Usually, and this is not all the time, usually an emotional catalyst is the primary bedroom. It's going to be the kitchen or the living room because that's where you do your living and connecting. Your most intimate relationships happen in bedrooms, kitchens, and living rooms in your house. Right? 80% of your living happens in those three spaces. And so it's emotional because you're dealing with other people, other relationships in those spaces. And you want the relationship not to suffer, and so it's an emotional, a big emotional block. And then usually the physical catalyst is going to be a storage space, so a storage room, cupboards, cabinetry. It can be garages are big catalyst spaces. Storage rooms and garages are just absolutely big deal. Sometimes it's craft rooms and workshops, and sometimes it does turn into the kitchen more on a logical level than an emotional level, just because so much is stored in your kitchen. And if it's a multi-use space, so it's not just a kitchen, it's not just for food, but if it's a kitchen that also houses puzzles and Play-Doh and artwork and all these other things, then there's a lot going on, and that's a multi-use, multi-purpose space. And so the physicality of the logic of that has to be there. So it's if you can find those catalysts and a place to start there again, these are going to be big projects. So get someone to help you go through it. Hire a professional organizer in your area. Find a way to, if it's emotional, to block that emotion as much as possible until it's time. Or if it's a logical, if it's a physical catalyst, learn how your space works. And that's when I recommend you go to Pinterest or online or Instagram, whatever your search engine of choice is, YouTube, to find other people in similar situations to see what they've done. And that's the advantage of what I've done. For the last 9 years, I've been in hundreds of households. And so I've seen all the different options and ideas that other people have used and the other ideas that I've implemented in other people's houses. Um, but if you have a specific problem to solve, go and figure out how to do that before you try to do it. Because if you try to just put it back the way that it was, obviously you're not fixing anything other than maybe quantity.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I don't think people realize what you touched on. Sometimes we emotionally block other people with our stuff.
yes.
It's like, I'm having a hard time with this such and such. And so everything you add is literally making a wall between you and being able to handle that issue, or you and the
Yes.
specific person that you're just subconsciously trying to block. And so that I feel like is another way to, and I don't even know if I want to talk about open your heart right away, because sometimes people are scared because they built that wall for a reason. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Oh,
But
absolutely. One of my clients, she was ready to move on. She called me because she had gone through enough time and healing that the walls she literally built to protect herself from an abusive husband after divorce and healing,
mhm.
but she was ready to move on when her heart had healed enough that she didn't need the physical walls there of stuff to keep her safe. So it's absolutely 100% true what you just said.
And it's okay. Like, that's why people like you exist, because we try to do it on our own and we fail and we try again and we fail. And then we just feel worse about ourselves. But it's okay to have someone come in and help you. I don't know if people
Oh,
really
absolutely.
understand the gravity of hiring a professional organizer. Like, I've witnessed it myself, of just their whole life shifts, and just being able to just clear your mind of so many walls that have been built. What's the
It's
percentage of emotional versus non-emotional?
It depends on how you approach life. So, because I live in a very neurospicy household,
Oh,
I'm
yeah. Let's
ADHD.
talk about that.
My boy, yeah, I have two sons who are ADHD. My daughter is autistic. And so there is an incredibly logical component to being able to get organized because organization is an executive function of the brain. That means, again, going back to this prefrontal cortex up here, our ability to think of an idea and go from thinking to executing to completion requires all of our executive functioning. And so that means task initiation, prioritization, time, ability to understand time. It is staying on focus. It is there are so many. There are what nine executive functions, and organization is one of them. And
Mhm.
if you don't have the executive function of organization, you physically cannot understand how to organize. And that is not right or wrong, or it is indifferent. It is not a moral standing. It is
Mhm.
not a moral situation. I can teach you how to have a higher emotional intelligence when it comes to stuff and understanding your relationship with things. I can't teach you everything because there is such a deeply rooted emotional component to how we learned how to interact with our stuff. And if we were raised by emotionally immature people or people of the product of the Great Depression, our country's history has taught us that stuff equals wealth. And so we look around at a house full of stuff and think, I must be wealthy and I must be safe
Mhm.
because that's what that equaled throughout the recent past of the United States history over the last 250 years is that's where we came from. So there's absolutely a huge and deep emotional component to stuff. And that's why I teach that emotional component to stuff because most of the time it's surface level enough that those five reasons work. Now, when you get into trauma, when you get into neurodiversities, when you get into mental health issues, that's when it becomes way more emotional. But balancing that out, it becomes almost entirely logical. So, trauma and emotional immaturity is obviously emotional, but when it comes to executive functioning, it can be almost entirely logical. So when I did the neuropsych evals for my kids, my daughter, who is autistic, she measured at 50th percentile for the executive function of organization. And my son came in at the second percentile of being able to organize, which means that is the deficit. That is the problem of his side of ADHD. And there again, ADHD is a spectrum, just like autism is. I'm learning this. Just because you have ADHD doesn't mean you look like the next guy, right? So if I mean, obviously, I my organization is my superpower. It is my son's downfall. However, I will say this because it is not right or wrong, because it is not a moral issue, you can get and learn coping strategies and skills to make up for that deficit.
Yeah.
So if you recognize that this is a deficit for you, stop punishing yourself for something you absolutely cannot control.
Yep.
You can work on the emotional side of things, absolutely. And you can go to therapy. You can work with somebody like me. You can do all of that. You can work on that, but you still can only get to a certain point before your brain is like, okay, got that taken care of. Like, that's off the list. We don't have to worry about that anymore. When it comes to the physical side of things, a deficit of the brain doesn't necessarily mean that you can fix it. You can't cure autism. You don't cure ADHD. You can work with therapies for OCD. You can I mean so there are certain things that you can do. You can't necessarily go from I'm in the second percentile in the executive function of organization to the 90th percentile of being able to organize. Your brain doesn't work that way. And
No.
that's not right, wrong, or indifferent. And I know that, there might be people that are listening to this going, well, but you can. Exactly. You can find strategies. You can help your own brain turn a negative into a neutral. We're not going supernova mode here. We're not going to like full on strength, like, oh, I used to be awful and now I'm amazing. It's, can I neutralize a negative? Can I take something that is currently awful and neutralize it through techniques and through coping strategies and through setting myself up with systems and routines? Can I do that in order to neutralize the situation? And my son, several years ago now, I'm trying to think, is it 5 years? I sent my son into a panic attack because I didn't understand the way that his brain worked. And I decluttered his room without him present.
Mm.
Psst, parents, don't ever do that to your children. That's how you cause trauma. Don't do it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Don't do that to your kids. I caused a 6 week long panic attack in my son. And I realized, oh my gosh, I caused that. This isn't something that he could have handled. He just had the response that he did. What am I going to do about it as the parent? And so that's when I started shifting things and saying, okay, how am I going to do this differently? How am I going to train him? To be able to self edit or be able to trust someone to edit for him in his space. So we've got it, we refined it, and it took me about 3 years to really understand the process of how I was going to help him and at the same time gain his trust back.
Yeah.
And so don't lose the trust in the first place, and you're going to be on a way better road
But
than what I.
okay, it's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard having a kid
So
who's
hard.
neurodivergent. Like
Yes.
it just is. And there's trust that's lost and you don't even know how it happened because you didn't know that that was going to be a trigger. Like it's
Yep.
a
It's
combination that's
hard.
just hard.
But the best thing that you can do, and this comes from psychologists and psychiatrists across the board, the best thing that you can learn how to do when you do something like that, everybody's going to mess up. And we don't know what our triggers are until they come, and then we can work on them. We don't know what our kids' triggers are until we until we step on that button, right? And then we can work with it, but it's the resolution. Can I resolve this problem? So instead of saying, well, that was just your problem and you better figure it out because I'm going to keep doing this because you can't keep your room clean. And so I'm going to clean it for you because blah, 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 blah. That would have made the problem last and it would have been miserable and awful. So instead, I tried to find a resolution. And I apologized to him and I said, I didn't realize that this was going to be this kind of a problem. I'm not asking you to trust me right now. Will you allow me to earn your trust back? And even as an 8 year old, he got it. And he understood that I was trying to make it right and I didn't expect a shift and a change immediately. And like I said, it took me 3.5 years in order to get to a point where I could say, dude, your room is a disaster. I know how you like to clean your room, and I know that you appreciate having a clean room. I have the day off today. While you're at school, can I tidy up your room? And I remember it was 3.5 years after that I caused his panic attack that he looked at me and he said, okay, mom. And I didn't like, oh yeah, I didn't celebrate. I didn't overreact. I just said, okay, thank you. And by the time he got home, I watched him walk in and just look around at his room. And then he breathed and he went on with and I didn't go in and nitpick anything. I didn't ask if anything because it had taken 3.5 years to learn that situation. And anybody dealing with a neurodivergent child understands that it takes time. But anybody with a neurotypical child as well, this doesn't mean that you get off scot-free. This
Hmm.
means that it's just going to be a little bit easier for you to understand where they're coming from and that for them to learn without explicit instruction. They're going to be able to pick this up on their own. But if you push and you break that trust, neurotypical or not, you're going to break that trust and that's going to result in issues in the future, neurodivergent, neurotypical alike, right? So Neurodivergent just means that you have to be way more explicit about how you teach organization and how you teach them how to let go. And the number one thing that you can do as a parent to neurodivergent, neurotypical alike is remove your emotion from their stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? Going back to that projected value, are you projecting your value onto their stuff? Because that gets muddy and that gets messy and that destroys the relationship because it's putting stuff in between you and them. So, we're still recovering from Christmas and my kids are now coming up on birthdays. And so it's like, well, that sweater that grandma sent you for Christmas, why don't you ever wear it? That the usual conversation sounds like, why don't you ever wear what grandma sent you? Don't you know that she loves you and she picked out exactly what she thought that you would like? And why don't you like it? And why don't you ever wear it? And why don't you wear this for school pictures coming up? I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if it's itchy. Like it looks good on you and therefore you need to wear it. That's projecting what you think grandma thought about it. It's projecting your value and opinion on it, and you're ignoring the emotional input of your child. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's projecting value, and then they're going to get stuck later in life. I organized a family getting ready to move, and I worked through with the parents, but they said our biggest issues are with our girls, that they just can't get organized, decluttered enough to move. And every time I asked them, hey, okay, moving on to your desk, is there anything right off the bat that you know that you can get rid of? And they would go to say, yeah, and they would catch themselves and they would go, but I need to ask mom first. Like you have trained your kids that your emotion is more important. Your emotion to their stuff is more important than that person. And that's one thing that I've learned how to do differently with my kids. So let me tell you how that shifted. Instead of saying, well, don't you know that grandma loves you and she got you the thing that she thought you would like the most, and I don't care how you feel, you're going to wear it anyway and be grateful about it. It's, hey, I haven't seen you wear that sweater that grandma gave you for Christmas. What's up? Well, I don't like it. Okay, tell me why you don't like it. Well, I don't like the color brown. Okay, I get that. When did that shift? You used to wear brown. Well, I only like the color brown if it's in camouflage. Oh, okay, that's a little bit different. Okay, what else? If that was a camouflage sweater, would you still wear it? Well, no. Why? Because it has a zipper on it, and I don't like zippers because they bunch up in the front and they get cold when they touch my skin. Okay. If it's cold when it touches your skin, can you wear a t-shirt under it and be just fine? Well, no, because it bunches up in the front and I don't like zippers. Okay, that's fine. So, what I've learned from you is you don't like brown unless it's part of camouflage. You don't like zippers down the front. But in the future, if you did have a zipper or buttons or something that was cold, you could wear a shirt under it to protect your skin. Is that right? Yep. Okay, go get your sweater and let's go donate it to a little boy who will love this brown sweater.
Mm-hmm.
And that shifted. And when I shifted that language with my kids, there again, it took years of me changing my behavior, my emotional input into my kids' stuff that all of a sudden shifted their ability to let go. So instead of holding on to something because mom's going to tell me that I have to let go of it because she doesn't like it, that triggers them to hold on to everything because they don't feel safe. They feel like they don't have any ownership and autonomy in their own space. And so I have to hang on to it. So it causes problems and the other role reversal as well. So it's gotten to the point now that I know them well enough that I can go buy something for them and do a pretty good job of finding things that they will actually wear. But now they're teens and so they can decide for themselves. But it's all of a sudden, hey, you're having a really hard time putting your laundry away. That tells me that you're overwhelmed with the quantity that you have. Go to your
Mm-hmm.
room and give me like two or three shirts that you're done with. Okay, mom. And if not, it's no, I like all the shirts that I have. Okay, then what can I do to help you be able to put your laundry away more easily? And that's how we implemented With neurodivergent brains, a lot of time quantity is the key. So we limited, my kids only have 20 hangers. And when we implemented that rule, it was intimidating and they didn't like it very much. But I said, hey, let's try it and see what happens. I don't care what you hang on those hangers. I don't care if you have 14 t-shirts, two, concert dresses and a couple of hoodies, or if they're all hoodies. I don't care what you put on those hangers, but you only get 20. And it was a little uncomfortable at first, and now they have no problem with it. And half the time my boys are like, do I have to have 20 hangers? I'm like, no, absolutely not. Uh-uh. You want to get rid of a few more? Well, no, because I like all these shirts. Okay. But now my emotion is not involved in their stuff. And so it's like, hey, I'm making a thrift store run. Go run through your toys downstairs and see what you're ready to get rid of.
Yeah, that's been a
If,
lifesaver. And
yeah,
it's something that I've always done since my kids were tiny. It started because the first house we were in was little and there literally just wasn't storage. So before every birthday and before every holiday that had presents, we would go through their stuff. And I would always say, we got to make room for the new stuff that's coming. Is there anything that you feel like you would want to give to someone else? And it was like, it was their responsibility to decide. And sometimes
yes,
they got rid of stuff that I kind of wish they would have kept because it was cool. They were in charge of their stuff and they were in charge of, like, okay, Christmas is coming. You're probably going to get some clothes. Are there any clothes that don't fit you anymore? Is usually, as you
yep,
grow, like, let's go through your closets. And I would be there with them just because sometimes it's overwhelming. And sometimes, if they are neurodivergent, they need someone to just sit next to them just
yes,
to let it
it's that
happen.
body doubling. It just happens.
Yeah, I just learned about that and I didn't even realize that was a thing till a couple weeks ago. But I have a couple kids that definitely do that. They can do it on their own if I'm just sitting next to them.
Hmm.
But it gives them that empowerment of, oh, it's my choice of what to keep. And I don't want to get overwhelmed with all the new stuff coming in. And so it's just become a habit of, oh, it's time to, out with the old in with the new kind of a thing. But it's not painful when it's time to get rid of something. It's just
Yeah.
been something that they've always done. And it's like, oh, time to clear out closets. But it's extra stress on you as a mom to be
Yeah.
like, oh, I have this huge project. Or it's extra stress on the kid that they have to look at all that stuff. And then there's no room for their current things that they want to be important. And like, oh, I got that shirt and I didn't even remember I had it because it was tucked behind my first grade, whatever.
Whatever, exactly.
Yeah.
So, applause to you. Let me tell you what you have done without probably even recognizing that you're doing that. So, number one, yes, you're teaching them that they can self-edit and that coping strategy of if this is hard for me, if I just bring somebody else in, this this can work. Because then once they move out, whether they're at college or starting trade work or doing whatever it is that they, when they're out living on their own, can they have uh you know they can set up and have a friend call them and say, hey, I'm coming over, like spontaneously, because then they're like, oh, I have to clean up. Or if they have their girlfriend come over so that they can tidy up, and get their dishes done. If you can call them and be on the phone so that their brain is somewhere else while they're doing a task
Mhm.
that's boring and mundane. You're giving them a coping strategy that works for them. So you can bring it up and say, hey, I noticed that you do a really good job when there's somebody else in the room. Good on you. And just leave it at that. And,
Yeah.
the older that they get, the more that they can comprehend that that's an actual strategy. But so you're allowing them to self-edit. You're removing your emotion from their process. You are teaching them coping skills and strategies for when things get hard. This is how we make it a little bit easier to be successful. You are in doing that, you are teaching them that they are responsible. Here we go back into the re's, okay? So
Mhm.
we've already talked about relationships, and you're not damaging a relationship by putting your emotions on their stuff in between you and them. So you are promoting a good relationship here. You are preventing from making their stuff your responsibility. Responsibility is huge for kids to learn where their responsibility is in the house. So think of responsibility as yours, mine, and ours, right? Your stuff is your responsibility. You wouldn't expect them to be responsible for putting away your laundry, but you are, you bet your bippy that you are responsible for your laundry. Go put your laundry away. And
Hmm.
if it's hard for you, then, I will be your prefrontal cortex. I will think for you and teach you different strategies of how are we going to do this. So I will interject myself on the thinking side of things, but not the emotional side of things. So I'm not taking on your responsibility, just like I don't ask you to take on mine.
Hmm.
And there are some shared responsibility in the house, shared responsibility areas, any shared space. We work on keeping and maintaining this together. But you're also avoiding causing any kind of resentment between you and your boys, you
Hmm.
and your kids, you and a spouse, you and coworkers, when you approach things this way. So you're preventing resentment and you're also preventing regret. And those are two different things. Resentment and regret are two different things. And so by allowing them to make their own decisions, there might be a couple things here and there that I've like slipped out of my kids' donation pile because
Hmm.
it's valuable to me. Remember,
Yeah.
going back to value, I found value in it. So I kept it for me, but I didn't project that value onto them and say, like, no, you can't get rid of that. That's still valuable. If it's worth keeping for me, then I am going to keep it and I'm going to take on that responsibility, but I'm not going to project it onto them.
Hmm.
So, there are some like drawings and things like that that they wanted to get rid of. And I'm like, oh, I'll just take it and put it over here in my pile.
I've done
But
that.
otherwise, you're teaching them how to self edit, be personally responsible for their stuff, how to do that without causing resentment and create that barrier in that relationship with them. And you're hopefully teaching them to not regret making any decisions. The great part about it is sooner or later they are going to get rid of something or hold on to something that they regret and say, why did I hang on to this? Or, oh, you remember before we moved, we had this and I can't believe I got rid of it. And then you can talk them through, ooh, ouch, that's an awful emotion. That feels terrible. I've done that before. So, dude,
Hmm.
I feel you. What have you learned from that so that that doesn't happen again? And it doesn't have to be from that specific item. Like what can you think of that you could have done to prevent that? And sometimes there isn't a way to prevent it. Remember when we talk about fear, the what if, just in case I might someday, um, it's we're doing the best logically that we can at the time. And we were fine up until now. We were
Yep.
totally fine up until I wasn't panicked up until now that I realized, oh man, I wish I would have had that. And then it's just learning the emotional maturity to say, dang, I made the best decision I could at the time. Now I wish I had it. And if I can replace it, I will. But if it was something that is sentimental, it might not be replaceable. And maybe this is when I just go write those memories down or, think about those items and, do something else. And that's when we grow into that emotional maturity to be able to handle that without projecting it onto other people.
That's awesome. I love that. Before we go, I know we've talked about the re's and then the five, what was it called?
The five reasons.
The
So
five
we have
reasons
the
and the
five
five re's.
re's.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
overall, give us what those are again so that we
Yes.
can have a refresher of how to handle
So
things in the
the
future.
five re's are the ways that we create negative interactions with our stuff, that negative relationship with stuff instead of people. So these are the things that we want to avoid. So negative relationships, okay? Making the relationship with stuff more important than the relationship with people, causing regrets, causing resentments, taking on other people's responsibility, and our emotional reasons. Those are the five reasons, and that's what we want to avoid. So we want to flip those into a more positive structure when it comes to interacting with our stuff. So then the five reasons, the reasons we get stuck in the emotional sense is time or overwhelm, nostalgia, guilt, projected value, and fear. And if we understand those, then we can understand better how to maintain a logical connection with stuff. I'm going to use stuff to connect with people rather than connecting with stuff and ignoring people. It gives us a way out when we recognize that we are stuck. When somebody says, well, clutter is just delayed decisions. Great. Well, what decisions are you making? That's where you're stuck. If you can't make a decision, then flip into those 5 reasons and make sure that you're proactively doing this in a healthy way and you're not creating resentment, regret. You're not, destroying relationships or taking on somebody else's responsibility. So it's a way to keep you in check, and it's a way to recognize when and how to interject emotion into the decluttering process, so that you can get organized logically and say, oh, okay, I know how to do this. I'm not going to get emotional when it comes to sorting out my garage. I'm going to channel my inner kindergartner and say, you know, hammer with hammer or hammer with tools.
Mhm.
Um, you know,
Like with like.
like with like. It's just sorting. It's red with red and blue with blue, right? It goes back to your preschool days of just sorting. That's not emotional,
Yeah.
right? And then the purging, the really fast yes, no, maybe. The obvious yeses are staying, the obvious nos are leaving. It's the maybe pile. That's where we're stuck. It's a maybe for a reason. That's when we dig into our emotional reasons and say, where am I stuck? How am I going to overcome this? And then the rest of it is I can put everything back in place in a logical way that I can repeat. So getting organized is not about looking perfect all the time. That's marketing. That's
Yep.
them saying, if you buy my product, your house will look like this. That is not what getting organized looked like. It's not all about the product. Being organized is about having a repeatable use of of interaction with your stuff. It means that I know what I have, I know where it is, I know how to use it, and I know how to clean it up when it comes to that point in time. That's all getting organized is. It's not about looking beautiful. It's having a logical, repeatable interaction and exchange with your things. That's all.
Yep.
So it can look however you want to. If you want to make it look beautiful, great. Good. Just go shopping at the end, not at the beginning.
Whatever we can do in our lives to make us feel less overwhelmed, the
Yes.
better.
Once you find that sweet spot,
Yep.
then it's easy because
It really does.
everybody makes
Once it
sense.
clicks,
Hmm.
it just is maintenance. And every once in a while, you notice
Yes.
something kind of adding up or whatever. And then it's like, oh, I recognize that in myself. Like I think about the way I used to live, and man, it's scary. Like, oh, it's so
Uh-huh.
bad. But then one day it clicked, and it was a big job at first, but then after that it just was natural and it came easy, and then I never wanted to get in that place again, and so I've
Yeah.
done little things to make sure that didn't happen, and then it became just a habit of, oh, this is how we live now.
Yeah.
But it didn't, and maybe it was just maturity and my brain formed completely or something,
Well, that
that
happens
could
too.
that
But
could
honestly, like I am not that professional organizer that has, I was neat and tidy from day one and like everybody just knew that this was my calling in life. Like when I told people I was a professional organizer, like they actually laughed at me
yeah.
because I mean, my roommates were the ones that had to have like an intervention with me. They were like, Ashley, you have to clean up after yourself. Like you have to do your dishes. You have to make your bed. You have to do your laundry because we have to live here too.
Yep.
Um, so that's just a testament to me that if you learn how, you can. And so that's why I come on podcasts. That's why I do it for a profession. This is, let
Yep.
me teach you how so that you can manage yourself. And I guarantee you, if I can teach a neurodivergent child with an undeveloped brain and an underdeveloping brain how to get and stay organized, it's just a matter of learning. And if I can do that for myself, if I can do that for my kids, if I can do that for the hundreds of clients that I've already had, you can learn too. You can learn how to do it. It might not be your superpower, but you can turn a negative into a neutral. And for those of us who, that can turn it into a superpower, it can be phenomenal. But either way, if it's neutralized, that means it doesn't bother you. And if you can turn it into something greater than that, it can be it's a huge success when we get out of that negativity and neutralize it, or better, it's a huge success. It's a burden off our back and it just feels good.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Wonderful.
relationships
Thank you.
thrive and
Yep.
businesses thrive and everything else. So,
I love it. Awesome. Well, where can people find you if they're looking to connect with you or hire you or get more information on just helpful tips to help them in their lives of decluttering?
absolutely. So I live in northern Utah. So if you need a professional organizer in northern Utah, you can go to rethinkclutter.com. Otherwise, just find me on social media. I am on Facebook and Instagram. I'm still on TikTok. I mean, you could, so it's just at Rethink Clutter on all of those platforms, and that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley. I appreciate you coming on
Thanks,
the
Kayla.
show
You're
and
amazing. I love
oh,
you.
it's mutual.
I miss
I
you.
miss you. Moving to Kentucky was hard and mostly because I
Yeah,
just missed you so dang
I
much.
know. My kids are still asking, so when are we moving to Kentucky, Mom?
I know, you better do it. We welcome you with open
There
arms.
you go.
But all right, well, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Kayla.